Good afternoon, everyone. We're about to get started, so please take your seats. Please keep your cell phones on, but in a vibrate or mute, so you can participate in our surveys. All right. Hello again. My name is Lorraine Gruscavage Frisbee, and I'm with HUD's Office of Outreach and Capacity Building. And also joining me today for this panel discussion on certification, I have Patricia Breslin. She is a compliance officer with the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency.
Hi, everybody.
All right, and we also have Linda Davis DeMoss, and she's with Balance.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, and you're located in Texas.
I am, yes.
All right, so we have a good representation. And last, we have Robin Penick, who is also with the Office of Outreach and Capacity Building and one of the primary organizers for this event. So thank you. And she's also very special to the certification process. If you've had any issues with FHA Connection, she's been our go-to person for certification. We also have a couple members of the audience that I'd like to introduce before we get started. We have representatives from two of our contractors that are very involved in the certification process. The first two I'd like to introduce are from Bixel, and we have Mary Carmen Smith Martinez and Mary Kay Allegre. If you two would please stand up, yay. Again, they're from Bixel, and they are project managers for the HUDhousingcounselors.com and the actual certification examination. Also, we have two people from Salient, and Salient handles the actual certification process through FHA Connection. And I'd like to introduce Ellen Depew and Hugh O'Brien. Ellen and Hugh, there you are. All right. Thank you very much. All four of these individuals are very integral to the certification process. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. And let me talk about what we're going to go over today. We're going to talk a little bit about the final rule. Oh, and I have to advance the slide, sorry. I'm used to doing webinars, and Ginger always advances the slides for us, so. We're going to, there we go. Okay, now that we've figured out where we're at. On this afternoon's agenda, we're going to talk, first of all, about some final rule requirements that are in effect in addition to certification. Then we're going to take a look back at what we've accomplished since the final rule was published in December 2016. Then we're going to hear from our two panelists, and they're going to share with you their experiences with certification with their network. And then Robin will talk again about FHA Connection and help you understand the steps and the options you have as an intermediary or a state housing finance agency in managing your network certification process. We'll also talk about the resources that are available, and then we'd love to hear from you for the last half hour. What are your best practices, first of all, that you can share with us regarding certification? And then we'll finish with a question and answer session. Okay, first of all, I want to talk about other things besides certification in the final rule that we've implemented. And what it has to deal with is the homeownership counseling and home inspection requirements. How many of you have had agencies that had a performance review after April of this year? Okay, just a couple. Did your point of contact ask for an updated work plan from your? Yes, okay, very good, yes, and that is what we're doing. We're implementing this as part of the performance review process. And briefly to remind everyone what is required. Any agency that covers or offers pre-purchase, post-purchase, default, or HECM counseling must cover all the homeownership topics that were outlined in the final rule. And those 4 homeownership topics include the decision to purchase a home, the selection and purchase of a home, issues that may arise during and affecting the period of homeownership, such as refinance, possibly default, and then lastly, the sale or other disposition of the home. The second part of the requirement deals with the home inspection materials. I think all of you probably remember from prior grant agreements that home inspection materials were only required for clients that were charged to a HUD grant. That's no longer the case. Any client that is interested in purchasing a home, you should offer home inspection materials. Thank you. Excuse me. So how do you tell us how you're going to do that? Well, you're going to do that by updating your work plan. Excuse me. DC and my allergies do not get along with each other, so I apologize for that. So what we'll do is we'll ask for updated work plans. If you're part of an intermediary network and we're visiting your affiliate or your subgrantee, we will ask your affiliate or subgrantee to make sure you've also looked at their updated work plan and you've approved it. Okay? So also, the home inspection materials are available on the HUD Exchange. And I just want to point out that there are no right or wrong answers when it comes to how you're going to. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I apologize for this. So there are no right or wrong answers to how you're going to incorporate it in your work plan. What we're going to be looking for is to make sure that you list all 4 of these topics and you tell us how you're going to cover them. They can be through one-on-one counseling. They can be through group education. They can be through handouts or other means. Okay. All right, let's move on to certification. A year later, what we're meaning a year later for the final, certification exam, which started August 1st in 2017. What we've been doing over the past 2 years, year and a half since the final rule was published, is working really hard to get the word out to not only you, our housing counselors, but also to the stakeholders of the approximately other 26 HUD programs that are covered by this final rule. This year, our primary emphasis has been on community planning and development programs, particularly the home and the CDBG programs, and public housing. So why I'm sharing this with you is if your ears are burning, we talk about you guys as part of our presentations. We tell them one way they can comply is consider becoming a HUD-approved agency, either directly through us or to reach out to an intermediary or state housing finance agency. And when we do reference you, we do tell them that you will may have additional approval requirements, or your network may not be accepting new members at this time. So some of the things that we've done in the last year is, first of all, we've updated the HUD Exchange. Thank you very much to ICF's help on that. And we've created a couple of web pages specifically geared to certification. Again, we've edited our FAQs primarily and other pages to reflect the certification requirements. We also launched the Housing Counseling Agency Eligibility Tool. How many people are aware of this tool? Okay, a handful. This is a really nice tool that you can actually use as part of your network vetting process. What it is it takes about a half an hour to do. It's available on the HUD Exchange, and it asks an agency a series of questions to see if they meet our eligibility requirements to either join our program directly or go through a network. But it's also a really nice technical assistance tool because it'll say, do you have a work plan? And if the person that's completing the tool goes, gee, I don't know, they can click on and they'll get a definition of the work plan. So please check this tool out. I think you'll find it very useful as a vetting tool for your new agencies as well. And again, of course, we launched the exam last August 1st. And we also created an online training called Introduction to Housing Counseling. This also covers the basics of housing counseling and lets new staff members, it would be a good tool for staff members, or for any agency interested in joining our program to understand more about housing counseling. We've also been pretty busy with our FAQs. We launched 181 FAQs that were specifically related to certification. And what's really cool is we had a searchable FAQ database now. If you're interested in reviewing questions specific to certification, you can go to that searchable database. You can see some topics. Or for your reading pleasure, we have about a 50-page PDF file available online also that covers all the FAQs. And it's really important to make sure your networks understand the FAQs. Many of the questions that we get in our housing.counseling email box are easily answered in the FAQs. And also help get the word out about certification. Jerry, in particular, has participated in several Training Institute events and talks to many counselors. And he comes back and he says, I know, I had counselors out there that didn't even know about certification. So it's really important that we get the word out to everybody. We also participated in about 50 outreach sessions. As I said, a lot of those were with other HUD program stakeholders. And we published 24 certification-related articles in the Bridge. Okay, I think one of two questions that I get in any outreach has to do with numbers. The other one has to do with the practice exam. So I'd like to share some numbers with you now. First of all, we want to give a shout out to our training grantee partners, NeighborWorks, NCRC, RCAC, and Unidos. They offer certification preparation classes, and over the last year, they have educated over 6,300 housing counselors, helping them get ready for the exam. So thank you very much, all of you, for that effort. Also, our website, hudhousingcounselors.com, we have about 8,500 registered users now. And anyone can register on that website for free. And then the other push this year that we've been working on, Robin especially hard, has to do with FHA Connection. You need to have an FHA application coordinator. How many of you in the room have an FHA application coordinator in your network? Okay, I only see a couple of hands. Next year when we ask this question again, everybody's hand needs to be up, okay? It's very important. Your counselors cannot get certified until you have an FHA application coordinator. And Robin will talk and provide much more details and the instructions how you can do that. So we've actually had 356 individuals through the end of July that have passed the certification exam, and we have 292 certified counselors. You're probably wondering, well, Lorraine, why don't we have 356 certified counselors? And there's actually a couple of reasons why. First of all, the exam is open to anyone, not just housing counselors. Anyone that pays the fee is more than welcome to take the test. And especially we found with our training providers, some of them will ask their trainers to take the exam, but then they won't get certified. The other thing is we have some individuals that don't take the critical step of transferring their data from Bixel and HUDHousingCounselors.com to our FHA connection system. It is contained in the email instructions when they pass the exam that they have to do this, but if they don't take that step, they can't then apply for certification through FHA connection. We also, as part of that statistic, 144 agencies do now have certified housing counselors. Okay, like I said, the second question we get quite a bit has to deal with the practice exam. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that and why it is set up the way it is. Many times we get a lot of questions, why don't I get a numerical result if I passed or failed it? And why don't I get answers to specific questions? And there's a couple of reasons why this occurs. First of all, the practice exam does measure your knowledge on the different topic areas, and some of the questions are very complex. And if we were to share the answers to those questions, you would know how to answer the exam questions, which kind of is something we don't want you to do. We need to be able to demonstrate you can figure that out yourself. So we do provide feedback though, and the bottom line is the more feedback you get, the more topics you need to study. And as a side note, one of the things that we've observed is our online modules. We have a total of 15 online modules on HUDHousingCounselors.com. And like I said, we have 8,500 registered users. We've noticed an awful lot of people go through Module 1, a little bit less go through Module 2, and by the time we get to Module 15, hardly anybody takes Module 15. I don't know why that's the case, because all 15 of those modules are critical and are there to help your counselors pass the certification exam. So it's important to give them time to study. Either study our online modules or have them go to an exam preparation class. Okay, for the certification exam, just a reminder, it is available either in person or online. And we have a really important change that is going to be effective August 28th, and that's going to be the inclusion of a virtual pen and paper. We barred any pencil or paper as part of the exam because we had had security issues. We had had a couple of individuals write us and say, this question that says this, this, and this, I don't think that's right. And, you know, they're definitely compromising the security of the exam by sharing that, because they shared that with us, and who knows who else they shared that question with. So that is why we didn't allow pen and pencil in, but thank you very much to Bixel. They worked very hard, these two ladies, with Criterion to develop a virtual pen and paper. So whoever takes the exam will be able to type information on the screen and, you know, use it during taking the exam, and then it will be erased when they're done with the exam. And that way it fits both our criteria. It doesn't compromise the security of our exam, but it also gives the individuals the opportunity, especially if they're doing a multiple step calculation. Again, when it comes to the certification exam, it is scored on a 500 out of 800 as a passing. It is scored in this manner, not up to 100, because questions are weighted. Some questions are more difficult and multiple part versus some of the simpler questions. And last thing on this screen regarding reasonable accommodation requests, Bixel processes those requests to first of all see if the person is eligible for the reasonable accommodation under the American with Disabilities Act. And they really need about 30 days to first determine if it's a valid ADA request and then to figure out how best to accommodate this person. So they are asking, do not have a person that is requesting an accommodation pay for the exam until you've talked to Bixel first, because then they'll determine, what needs to be done to take care of that, and they are requesting at least 30 days. So you go ahead and you can contact Bixel either by telephone or through their technical support and send an email for situations like that. And we do get questions about the exam fee. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we're really excited, and Bixel and HUD have worked really hard to update the training, the practice exam, and the certification exam. And all of this is going to be launched August 28th, and very excited about that. The training topics that are going to change includes, first of all, content relating to FHA back-end ratios and conventional mortgage. We got quite a bit of feedback on that. And when we get feedback on the training, we do share that with Bixel, and they determine if updates are needed. They are also provided some clarifications about the financial information that's required on the uniform residential loan application, and also details to clarify mortgage servicing guidelines for FHA loans. And then, of course, as we're all aware of the sunset of the Making Home Affordable program, much of the HAMP information will be updated or will be eliminated, and the new flex modification program offered by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac will be contained in the new training material. Now, how the exam and the practice exam work is they are based on the most current training material. So that means effective August 28th, when counselors take the certification exam, it's going to reflect this new training material. So if you've had a counselor that has been studying the old material, and they're going to wait until August 28th or later to take the exam, please stress to them to go ahead and take a look at the revision history. The revision history is posted on HUDhousingcounselors.com, and it lists all the changes. So your counselors don't have to study from scratch again. All they have to do is look on that, and they can see exactly which training content was updated. Okay. Other things that we're working on, we're going to be updating and adding new frequently asked questions. And we're also going to be working on additional bridge articles to talk about certification. I hope you found the past ones. How many in here read the bridge on a monthly basis? Okay, very good. Thank you. We definitely provide information and tips on the bridge when it comes to certification. We're also going to be adding some new resources to the HUD Exchange that are going to be primarily geared at other HUD programs, so they can determine if, in fact, they are covered by the final rule and certification requirements. We're also going to be updating the housing counseling eligibility tool, and we're also considering a second type of practice exam. At this point, I don't want to make the promise to you that we will have a second practice exam, but it's something that we're thinking about. And when we have the question and answer session, would really appreciate your feedback on that. If we were to have a second practice exam, please tell us some of the things that you and your network members would like to see on that practice exam, because that'll definitely help us. Another question has to deal with, well, are the fees going to go up? All I can say is we will have to issue a Federal Register notice 60 days before there is a fee change. So right now we have not issued that Federal Register notice. So until that happens, there's not going to be any fee changes. Okay, I know I covered a lot of material, and we're going to wait until the end for questions and answers. So right now, though, we're going to turn it over to our two guest speakers to share with you their certification experiences and best practices. And first, I'm going to turn it over to Patricia.
All right, thank you very much, both of you, for inviting us to come. And PHFA does have a reimbursement program to incentivize our agencies that I'm going to cover with you, but I want to discuss PHFA a little bit. First of all, we're located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. For 2017, we had 41 HUD subgrantees that we have administered. Of those, in those, we have about 115 counselors, and 13% of those have passed the exam. Something that's really important to know about us is we don't provide direct counseling, so we just manage the agencies. Another really important thing about PHFA is we emphasize training very heavily, and I want to give you some examples. We actually provide weekly webinars on our funding streams. We have 3 funding streams. We have our internal funding stream, we have a NeighborWorks funding stream, and of course we have HUD. And every Wednesday we have a webinar about one of those programs, or our CMS system, or mortgage topics in general. So there's a wide variety. We also have target-based training where we have agencies that are struggling with their billing. We will have individual webinars with them to teach them how to do the billing. And then finally, and for this audience most importantly, every year at the beginning of the fiscal year when the grant is allocated, we hold 2 orientations for the new HUD grant and what needs to be done. And then every quarter, at the end of the last quarter and at the end of the quarter and the following Friday of the first quarter, I hold a 9902 webinar to teach people how to do the 9902s, the importance of the outcomes and impacts, and I go through Section 10 line by line, what they should be looking for. And I do that. And then additionally, if I find agencies who are just not getting it, I'll talk to them separately. I'll have a separate small webinar with them and talk to them about each one. This webinar is also available to them for them to download so they can see all the instructions for the 9902 and how to upload it and what's required for it. So that's a little bit about our training. But getting back to our reimbursement program, we decided when the training began in last August that we were going to provide some incentive for our agencies. And what we did was we have promised $500, a maximum of $500 per counselor to reimburse for training and for the cost of the exam. And so the way this works is we will pay the cost of the exam up till $500. So it doesn't really matter how many times they have to take it, but they can't max it as long as they don't max out the $500. Then we will also pay for the hours they spend training and studying on business time. And that is based on their hourly rate times their fringe rate. So, and I'll give you a quick example. If their hourly rate is $20 an hour, and that includes the fringe, and they take the exam once, and that's $60. They take the hourly rate times 10 hours of studying, and that's $200, so they would be entitled to $260 from us. Now, the last part of this is to encourage them to incentivize their counselors. So what we do is we require them to wait 6 months after the exam has been passed to bill us for that amount. The reason for us to do that is we've been kind of encouraging them to pass some of that money along to the counselors, and it's entirely their decision. We have, shall we say, mentioned it to them that we think it would be a good idea because it's a difficult test and it's a lot of work to take it. So after the 6 months, they can bill us and we will reimburse them for the time and the cost. So that's how it works. The next steps for us is, first of all, whenever we get new information from HUD, although we expect our agencies to know it, we also advise them immediately. So I'll be going back and talking to them about the August 28th date, and then following up by phone call, by email, whatever it takes to get them in, because we had encouraged them to split it up. We suggested a third every year of the 3 years, and as you can see, at 13%, we don't have 30% of our agency. So I have some work to do when I get back and to encourage them to meet our goals.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Patricia. That's a very interesting and sounds like a very successful model. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we'll hear from Linda with Balance.
Hi, thank you. And I'd like to take an opportunity to thank OHC for having us here, and specifically Robin and Lorraine for assisting us on this panel. So Balance is, I would say most of you probably know us as the former CCCS of San Francisco. That's, most people kind of look at me and question, Balance, wait, National HUD Intermediary, who is that? And I say CCCS San Francisco, and then they had the aha moment. We are based out of, obviously, San Francisco, California. Our headquarters is in Concord, so not too far up the way. I am remote, so I am based out of Texas, as Lauren mentioned earlier. We've been providing housing counseling since 1969. In terms of the intermediary role, though, we're more, I would say, newer to that field in that we became a national intermediary in 2015. And so I recently joined Balance in November from another intermediary. So in that regard, I would say I'm not new to the intermediary space. It's just our organization is still kind of learning our steps there, and I feel like it's a constant lesson. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, is a constant evolution to this industry. So for us, I'm going to be talking from a slightly different perspective than Patricia. We obviously provide direct counseling. So we have our counselors, and then we have a subgrantee network of 13. And so the information that I'm going to provide for you today, when I talk about certification, it's really more about our specific Balance counselors. We're in the process right now of providing assistance to our subgrantees. So we went through, I would say, the lessons learned first, so that then we could provide assistance to our subs. So a couple of things, and some of you may have seen this before in the Bridge article that was published back in, I believe it was April. So we really broke it down into 5 steps. So the first one was leveraging the existing resources. There's a ton of information, great information and valuable information out there. And what we really did was take a step back and say, what's there, what works for us in our model, and what do we think would be conducive to our counselors really processing this information. And so we looked at several different resources and looked at implementing some of this. So there are some flashcards out there. There's a lot of other additional training material in addition to the HUD Housing Counseling website and the practice module. So we really implemented some of these and had them available in a resource library for our counselors. In particular, when we talk about pacing yourself, this was a huge, I think, obstacle for us, because it became the question of, it doesn't matter how senior a counselor may be, some of this information may not necessarily be stuff that they do on an everyday basis. So if I have a counselor that does primarily HECM, although he could provide information on pre-purchase, it's not something that he does on an everyday basis. And so they needed some refreshers. So we wanted to make sure that we provided them time for this. So I think for us, a critical lesson was making sure that we scheduled the time for them and not necessarily allowing the counselors to self-select time. And it was really important that the managers understood, and for us even just balancing capacity-wise during this time, to make sure that they had enough time and that time was respected, because I think all of us can attest and understand the challenges that we have every day in demand of services. And so we made sure that we scheduled them out looking at both the 15 modules that are available, giving them time, and we essentially broke it down and said, these are the modules that you'll be reviewing during this 2-week period, and then there was a check-in, and then these are the ones that for the following week, and so forth. And so it was broken down in that manner. We also took a slightly different approach. So there's the practice test that's available on the website. We also have an additional test that we have that our counselors go through, and it's 100 questions. I know that may sound a little daunting, but we basically had them do a pre-test. And then in addition to that, then they went through the 15 modules, the practice test that's available on the website, and then once they were done going through all that study, they did a post-test. And it really helped us, I think, complement what was available on the the HUD Housing Counseling website, the practice tests, so the information it gives you back of the areas that you could potentially fortify. And so for us, we viewed that as an area of opportunity. The pre-test identified some of that for us. And then by that point, we had a discussion with the counselors. They knew where to identify areas of potential improvement. So as they went through the 15 modules, by the time they went through and did their post-test, they were in a far better position. So I think that was critical. And I should share that when we talk about pacing themselves, we really gave them a 2-month period. So that's what every counselor had in terms of their onboarding process, or more like the preparation process. Planning ahead, again, we really looked at making sure that we could cover, so we spaced our counselors in terms of how many were taking the exam and at what times, and making sure that, they, again, had constant feedback from our training and their managers as well. And I think getting input from your community was a critical one, right? There's a ton of, as you mentioned, there's the additional training resources from RCAC, NCRC, and NeighborWorks and others out there. The other thing was, it was interesting, we're seeing more and more of our stakeholders in California specifically asking, and it's starting to draw their attention, the certification requirements. So, we have been forthcoming and saying when we were in the preparation stages that we were looking at doing this, what our timeline was for onboarding and for execution. And so we've seen more and more of those stakeholders say, well, we're going to start requiring that it be a HUD certified counselor that provide the service. So notwithstanding that they have a national certification that's recognized, there was that denominator. So for us, that's been very telling as well. And I would say the other thing is, when we were talking earlier, Patricia and I, about being mindful of test anxiety, some people don't like tests. A lot of people don't like tests. And so there's a natural anxiety that goes with that. Some of you are probably going to ask, because I had a couple people stop me earlier about failure rates. We have one counselor that failed, and I would say we probably knew it was going to go that way just from the test anxiety even before taking the exam. She was definitely struggling with that. It was more of a fear factor. She took it again, and I think at that point it was kind of the unknown factor was eliminated, and so she took it again, passed flying colors. And so I think that's been critical of just trying to make sure that they understand, short of a brand new counselor coming in, which I can understand that would probably be extremely daunting. I think for us, it was making sure that we built them up to understand, you do this on a regular basis. The difference is that the person sitting across from you may not be asking you specific, very pointed questions like the exam, but to really take their time and be confident in their skill set that they could get through this. And I think for a lot of them, that helped ease the process as well. So as she mentioned, we did make a critical commitment, and I can't take the credit for that. although I would have definitely pushed for it had I been with Balance before. That was a Balance executive decision that we were going to make sure that all of our housing counselors were 100% certified, and we accomplished this by February. So it was not an easy task. But I would say that it was part of our deep commitment to making sure that we were supporting the mission. And I think, as many of us have mentioned before, it helps set a standard for our industry. We all may do our business differently, but at the end of the day, I think we needed that special designation, and I think this will go a long way for the future of our industry as well. So next steps, as we mentioned before, it's really, I have the fun task now of helping our subs really get through this process. And I think for us, having gone through it with our direct counselors, it's gonna hopefully be a far easier process of really getting everyone through it successfully. So I'm sure we'll probably have some bumps in the roads, and we'll see how the new changes from August 28th. So now you've added some additional fun stuff to my table, but we'll get through it, and we're very optimistic.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much, Linda and
Thanks.
Patricia, for sharing. If you have any questions for either of them, please jot them down, and you can ask your questions during our question and answer session. And one thing I want to remind everyone, housing counselors only have to pass the certification test one time. So even if they change agencies, they do not have to take that exam a second time. We will maintain their records that they passed the exam indefinitely. So there's no reason to think, oh, maybe we need to wait until August 1st, 2020. We strongly recommend that you don't do that, and you get your network certified sooner than later. Okay, now I think we're going to have a polling question.
Okay, great. Hopefully you have your smartphones ready. And click it one more time, Lorraine.
There it is.
Okay, so we're going to take a polling question, and we really want to know where you folks are with certification. So we will wait for the poll to come up, and then we will have it. So we're really most interested in how many, or if you have HUD certified housing counselors. Okay, right. So does your network already have HUD certified housing counselors? Yes. No, but we expect to soon, or not yet, but will by the final compliance date.
I'm really happy to see the blue.
Right? This is amazing.
That's
this is
great.
amazing.
That's great.
Okay. About a third of the group has voted.
That's only 28, though.
Yep, we're watching the numbers slowly go up. Is this fun or is this fun?
I know.
We're looking for more of you that have said no, but we expect to
Yeah.
soon. Okay?
Only 40 of you have responded. It's okay, you won't hurt our feelings if you're going to choose the last one.
Okay, we have 30 seconds left. 30 seconds left. So please, we want to hear from you.
I feel like we need a drum roll or something.
I know, right? Do, 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 do. I know. I'm sorry. I'm singing in front of you. My husband would be horrified. Okay.
Well, this is a good segue into our next session.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, Shauna. Well, for those of you that didn't answer in blue, hopefully the next segment of our presentation will help you in developing a game plan, because we're going to talk and give you some best practice examples for charting your own network's path to certification. And basically, three overarching steps to that are, first of all, to make sure you do understand the overall process. That's important in establishing a game plan. And then we've developed some key intermediary steps for you to take in your planning and your execution. And finally, you need to create your own timeline, and hopefully you want that done before August 1st, 2020. So first of all, let's take a look at the certification process. We actually have 2 columns here because it's reflective of the 2 different systems that are involved in the certification process. The left hand of our chart deals with HUDhousingcounselors.com. That is where users register and pay to take the certification examination. And every time they take the exam, they do have to pay the exam fee. And then when they do pass the certification exam, they have to authorize HUDhousingcounselors.com to send their information to FHA Connection. So when that arrow is accomplished, they then need to go over to FHA Connection, apply for a user ID there, and then their employment with the agency has to be verified. And I'm not going to go through these steps in detail because Robin's going to do that when she goes over her section and she talks about the certification process. So we have a best practice suggestion for you. We have 6 steps that we're recommending for an intermediary to develop your own game plan to get your network counselor certified. These are best practice suggestions, and we look forward to hearing both from Patricia and Linda and their feedback on what they did and what they're still going to work on for the future. So the first step in the process would be to maybe do some broad goals for certification. And some of the things that you can ask yourself and the rest of your network administrators is, first of all, what kind of training should we offer? Linda and Patricia gave 2 different examples of trainings that they do and how they focused on certification. Are you going to do the training internally or just have them do independent study, or are you going to send them to one of the training partners for a certification preparation test, or perhaps both? Both are definitely good options as well. And also decide what kind of tools you're going to use as part of this preparation. Are you going to create your own, like Linda talked about? They created a pre-test and a post-test for that. And then determine how many counselors are in your network and when they need to be certified by. Like Patricia shared with us, their game plan is to have about 1/3 of their counselors each year certified. So the next step would be, well, what time and resources can you, as the network administrator, the parent agency, offer? Can you make recommendations or even reimbursement for the time for the counselors to study and maybe even the cost of the exam? Then the next step that we recommend in this best practices model is, determine what your role is going to be and also what resources you have. Within your network, do you have any expertise in any of the 6 areas? Do you have any staff members, for example, that are very strong in fair housing that can help teach your network? Also, what kind of encouragement and support are you going to give? For example, Patricia shared a reimbursement and hoping that they would pass some of that money on to their counselors, possibly. So what are you going to consider offering? And then formalize your policies and your procedures for certification. And then you need to decide how you're going to manage the process. As an intermediary or a state housing finance agency, you have 2 choices. You can either be directly responsible for certifying all of the counselors that are in your network, or you can ask your affiliates or your subgrantees to do that. And Robin will talk about those options more in depth when she covers her section. And that, of course, once you make that decision, then that will help you decide what role your FHA application coordinators will have in this process. And again, you do need at least one FHA Connection application coordinator, regardless of how you decide to administer your certification program. Because at a minimum, that individual will be able to monitor your network. So that's a very important role for you. You also may need to modify your quality control plan. For example, you might include some updates for certification, what your goals are and your timeline is, and you want to make sure that you're going to communicate those to your network. And then also describe the resources that you're going to provide to your network and what systems you're going to use for tracking your housing counselor certification. And then, of course, include certification-related tasks in your performance reviews. When you go out and you visit your agencies, part of that review should include a discussion about certification and how far they're progressing on that. And then again, plan now, because you don't want August 1st, 2020 to roll around and you don't have a game plan in place. Excuse me. All right. One of the ways that a counselor can be derailed very quickly is not having the proper equipment set up or the space for taking a certification exam. And it's really important that you encourage your affiliates and subgrantees to review the know before you go. This is a brochure that Robin Penick developed. Got to give her credit for that. And it gives you test-taking tips and preparation tips. Make sure all counselors have access to this and they've reviewed this. You need to make sure that your equipment is going to be compatible. And all this information is available on HUD-HousingCounselors.com. If you have any issues, you need to find out at least, hopefully, a week before. Bixel has shared with us some stories where a counselor will register and pay their fee and then schedule their test for like 10 minutes later. We strongly discourage that, because if there are system issues, they're not going to know because they didn't test their systems ahead of time. So, strongly encourage that you set your counselor's test for at least a week so they can do the appropriate testing. Also, it's important to make sure the space that they're taking the certification test at is free of any distractions, free of fair housing posters, anything that can be misconstrued as having something on the wall that can help the counselor answer the questions. And our CAC actually developed a video on getting ready for the test. So that video is available on the HUD Exchange. Again, we strongly recommend that you review that as well. There's some other things that you can do, and these are just suggestions. Perhaps carpool for in-person courses. If there's a training available in your town, kind of plan together for saving resources to attend that. Again, set up the exam space as we talked about, and use the training partners. I'm actually located in Las Vegas, Nevada, and our housing authority decided that they wanted to certify not only the counselors that are currently in their housing counseling program, but also all their FSS, their family self-sufficiency coordinators. So they contacted one of these training providers, and they're going to be having a class in September, and they have invited the whole housing counseling community to the class free of charge. So we're very excited to see that kind of level of cooperation in our area. the next step we have, of course, is to follow up with your affiliates. You know, we recommend at a minimum taking a look at this next year. So when I'm here next year, I'm going to say, okay, how's your plan progressing? How you doing with your affiliates? We're going to do our phone call again, and we're going to see a whole lot more blues, right? Right? Yes, there we go. Thank you. I'm going to hold you to it. So anyway, you should be planning now and have a game plan at a minimum so you can implement it starting next August. And of course, you know, there are a lot of good options and ways you can promote this. And I definitely liked Patricia, where they're giving some kind of incentives for that. So I think that's one way that you can do it. Also, you know, if you have any questions or issues with the certification process, please feel free to reach out to your HUD point of contact, or you can send an email to the housing.counseling@hud.gov email box, and Robin basically for now handles all of those requests, and she's helped over 80 of the counselors become certified, so good job on that. Thank you very much for that. And of course, make any adjustments that you need to. And so the last step in our best practice process is, of course, recommending that you do this sooner than later. Don't wait until the last minute, but you're also going to have to make some contingency plans. What's going to happen August 1st, 2020, and you have network members that don't have any certified housing counselors? You need to communicate to them well in advance what your policies are and what's going to happen. Because if they do not have any certified housing counselors come August 1st, 2020, they can no longer provide housing counseling under our HUD program. So make sure you have some strict policies in place for that, and make sure it's communicated well in advance of that date. Also, you also have to think about when you're going to be adding new agencies to your network. What's going to be your policy? What's going to be your timeline for them to have certified housing counselors? Are you going to require, for example, that they show evidence their counselor has passed the exam and they're just waiting for the agency to become part of a network so that they can become certified? So these are some questions for you to think about. And then lastly, we've created a sample timeline for you, and you definitely need to make the timeline fit your network. But here's a proposed timeline for approximately 8 months. And with that, I'm going to ask Patricia and Linda if you guys have any additional suggestions about what you have to work on yet and how you're going to change your program, if at all. Patricia?
I think 8 months is a fair amount of time.
Great.
Gives them time to study, and take the trial exams, of course. And we've been encouraging them to take the trial exams, go through the modules, and but maybe what I will consider, just listening to Linda and listening to you, is there any way we can help to train them?
Yeah,
Directly,
absolutely.
in addition to what we're doing now.
Great comment. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank
Great.
you.
Linda?
No, so I think somewhat similar. I mean, we'll obviously be providing some direct training for our subgrantees, as well as making it open to other agencies that would like to participate and that would like to take advantage of that opportunity. I think the other thing that we learned going in, so we have counselors that are both in our branches, as well as we have remote counselors. And so the remotes, for the most part, they went and did the proctored exams. The counselors that are located in branches, they obviously prefer the flexibility of being able to take the exam at the office. And so one thing that we learned, and it obviously worked well for those that are located in headquarters, for those that are outside of headquarters, they ultimately chose to go proctor. is finding that space, right? So I think for us that was definitely, it took the week to get it prepared, test it, make sure that the room had absolutely nothing. So it was probably the most barren room we had in our office. And it was literally designated as the testing office. And so we just had counselors, we scheduled them and had them, they would simply go into that room and test, so that we didn't have to be setting up multiple different spaces and making sure taking down stuff, putting it back up. So that worked well for us. With my subgrantees, that's obviously not likely going to be the case. And so they're all structured a little bit different. I have rural, I have urban. And so I think for most of them, the preliminary discussions has been a preference for proctor exams. So we'll see. I think you also want to put them in a comfort level, right? I don't want them to all be with the anxiety of, making sure that they think they're going to test in a room that isn't essentially equipped. John's video is amazing. That came out after we had gone through our process. I'm like, dang it, if that would have been helpful for us. And I give him a hard time about that all the time. So I think that's a great resource that's out there as well. So if you're going to take the exam in-house, watch the video, because it definitely helps, in your pamphlet as well, I think provides great direction. Now that they've heard your $500 reimbursement thing, I'm gonna, thanks for killing everyone in the room. To see what we've been trying to figure out what type of incentive to provide for the agencies as well. So I think that's something that we still have some work to do, but we definitely are gonna provide reimbursement of some casts, maybe not $500, but provide some type of incentive, as well as making sure that they have access. And I think following a similar timeline is going to be critical. You don't want to have everyone waiting to the last minute. So I'll use a reference I think we all understand. It's like HCS. Don't go do your 9902 reporting the day of at the last minute, or grants.gov. Don't submit your grant application last minute. Same philosophy. Try it sooner the better. And that's, I think, what we did too. So I would follow the same.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, ladies. And now I'm going to turn it over to Robin Pienick, who's going to talk about FHA Connection.
And good afternoon. And I guess my first question is, what is the FHA Connection? So this is the HUD system that houses the HUD Certified Housing Counselor Database, as well as the HECM Certified Counselor Roster. So that's what we're talking about. And I think, okay. And so as we all know, counselor certification requires that a counselor pass the exam and work for a HUD approved or HUD participating agency. And once the counselor passes the certification exam and transfers their results to the FHA Connection, counselors then need to apply for certification in the FHA Connection. And the counselor's application is not complete until their employment has been validated or verified. And agencies must all designate an FHAC application coordinator who will have access to the system and be able to verify the employment of their counselors. And on the screen is a snapshot of the HUD Exchange page, where all the instructions can be found and printed regarding the counselor application process, as well as the application coordinator process. The blue arrow on the screen is pointing to the link where you actually download the instructions. We just recently got dual computer screens in our office, so I'm now excited that I don't have to print everything on paper, but in case some of you don't have those dual screens, having a copy in front of you is really helpful. So some very important key points about the FHA Connection. Remember, it's used by both counselors and application coordinators. If applying only as a coordinator, you'll need to apply for an FHAC user ID. If applying to be both a coordinator and a certified counselor, you need to complete the counselor application first and then apply for an FHAC user ID next. There's some conflicts that can be created in the system. if the coordinator cannot be the same person currently registered in the line of credit control system, LOCS, nor can they be registered as the Web Access Security Subsystem Coordinator, WAS, nor can they currently act as the FHA Lender Coordinator for the agency. So there's some three caveats there on who is not going to be your FHAC application coordinator. So on the next screen, this is the actual FHAC homepage. So if you are registering to become an FHAC coordinator, you will click on the registering a new user on the button. And I realize I may be telling somebody here that has no idea what this is and won't ever get into the FHAC, but you're going to have a staff member eventually say, gosh darn it, I was on that FHAC system that HUD has and I can't get anywhere. And you'll be able to say, here's some instructions. You can go get instructions, or you can call this person that you heard. So you'll click on that registering a new user on this page. And then once you click that, another page will pop up and it'll say you'll need to click that you want to get to the housing counseling group. And then once you click on housing counseling, then you'll get this registration page. And there's some pain points on this page. And I want to talk about those just a minute. If you are registering as a HUD certified counselor or as an application coordinator and a counselor who has passed the exam, you'll click on the first box up there. And the first box is, are you registering as a member of the FHA Housing Counselor Database? So that one is only clicked if you've taken and passed the certification exam. If you are registering only as an FHAC application coordinator, the second box is the one you'll click. And it says, are you registering as an FHA Connection application coordinator for the housing counseling agency that employs you? So if you're only registering as a coordinator, click that second box. And everybody has to put in the agency ID, which is your HCS agency ID. So you'll continue filling this out after you've clicked the correct boxes. And believe it or not, the instructions that talk about the 8-character password and having one uppercase, one lowercase, one special character, they really do mean that. I mean, that's what your password has to be. 8 characters, special characters, and one number and one uppercase. And then once you get this all completed, you'll hit send. And at that time, you'll start the registration process. And so currently, how the system works right now is that that user ID for the FHA Connection Coordinator will be mailed to the agency CEO. We get the address for that agency CEO out of what's in HCS. And if the information is incorrect in HCS, that agency CEO will not get that application coordinator ID. In October, at the end of October, this process is going to change a little bit. We're going from a paper-mailed ID to an electronic, emailed, encrypted ID, not to the CEO, but to the agency program manager. And once again, we're going to get that email address from HCS. So if the information's wrong in HCS, that email's going to go to the wrong person. So just make sure your information's correct in HCS. So once you've completed the registration process, and hopefully you'll get a success message after you submit your information in there. Then the role of the coordinator is to go in there and verify employment. So the coordinator will log back into FHAC using the ID that they got mailed to the agency program manager. They'll use the password that they created on their registration form, and they'll navigate to the housing counseling database. And the instructions for that are back on the other screen where you download the instructions. You'll use those instructions again. And on this sheet, you're going to enter the counselor's last name. You will also enter the counselor's agency ID, the counselor's agency ID. If you're the parent agency and you're validating somebody else's ID from another agency, you want to pick up the agency ID that that counselor works for. And then you'll select certified for the counselor type, and you'll select no for validated by agency. And once that happens, the counselor's name should appear, and then you'll click on the name of the counselor that you want to validate, and then go to the little box and verify that this counselor works for this agency. And once this process is complete, the counselor is certified. And the counselor can print their own certificate, the agency can print the counselor's certificate, and that happens as soon as you verify the employment of that counselor. As Lorraine was talking about, there's a couple of different ways or options that agencies can handle this process. And it's just really important to be aware of those differences and determine what works best for your agency and your network. In the first option here, we have the option of the affiliate being responsible for verifying all counselors, all of their counselors. Each affiliate would verify all theirs. And then intermediary application coordinators, they would also obtain an FHAC user ID simply to view their affiliates and monitor. It's like, okay, agency XYZ, they've got all their counselors, certified, or agency Y, they've only gotten one counselor certified, and it's 3 months before the deadline. That might be a concern for you and your organization as a parent organization or oversight organization. The second option is for the intermediary to act solely as the application coordinator and take responsibility for all counselor certification within their network. And so I think it's whatever works best for your agency. I was recently made aware of an agency that's an intermediary organization that's taking that option, that second one, where they're going to go in and certify all their network counselors. So it's interesting to see the differences, but I think as long as you're planning for this and you've decided and made these decisions that, and if it works for you, it's good. So, and we have lots of resources available, and I hope everybody's been able to at least look at some of what we have. As Lorraine mentioned, on the HUD Exchange, we have our certification final rule page. We also have, how many FAQs were there, Lorraine?
181.
And I really want to stress that because a lot of questions that we do get are answered in our FAQs. The counselor certification application process, that's the page that I just went over with you all. And the bridge. The bridge is a constant source of information on our programs, and specifically January, February, and April of this year, we have certification articles there. The other website I'd like to talk about is our HUDhousingcounselors.com, and that is the training and testing center for the HUD certification exam. There are links to the online testing proctoring support that's available. There's also an online test-taking guide, very, very informative on what the requirements are, what the system requirements are for your own individual computer in regards to taking the exam. So would love to hear about uses of our materials and what works and what doesn't work for you all too. So I'm very interested in training materials.
You wanted that. Oh, I'm sorry.
The next, I want to make sure everybody's aware of this. There are 2 public searches available in regards to housing counselor certification. One is an agency search, and this is an opportunity for anyone to go in and do a search to see what agencies have certified housing counselors. You can do it by state, you can do it by city, zip code, but the links for those searches are on your handout. And then the second public search is the certified counselor search. And this is done, say, if somebody were to present me with a certificate and say, oh, I'm a HUD certified counselor. Well, somebody can take that counselor number, enter it into this system, and it will identify the person that's associated with that number, as well as the agency they work for. If it's a made-up number, they will get nothing back in there. There will be no validation of it. So there are 2 ways that the public can search for certified counselors, if you will.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for that information, Robin. We talked a little bit longer than we were supposed to, but we love talking about certification. So thank you very much for that. We would like to open it up. First, if anybody would like to share any network best practices first, and then we'll take your questions and we'll do our best at answering those. Would anyone like to share a network best practice? Sure. Can we have a HUD person pass around the microphone?
So in New Jersey, we started preparing for the certification. We hired Angela Davis, not the one that was in the news, not the activist, but Angela Davis from NeighborWorks. And she put together a series of trainings for us. We did one a month. And they were each component of the exam. And we offered that, everyone in our intermediary got it for free. And anyone else that wanted to be part of the exam paid a fee for it, but it was a reduced fee because we had a grant for it. And that's helped a lot because she talked through it, and each section we had we had questions as we went through. So she asked people to see what they would answer, and then she gave the answers.
Okay.
So that was really helpful. And it's also on our website, so if anybody wants to use it, it's on our website. So that is open. Yeah, but I do have a quick question, just for clarification, if I could hit it at the same time.
Sure, go ahead. She's got to sneak
You were
it in,
talking
right?
about the counselors being certified and connected with their agency. What about those counselors that are no longer employed at their agency and you're trying to look up their certification?
They will not show up.
So then
because
how do we do
They
that?
lose their certification when they're no longer employed.
So how do we verify that it was for real that they were certified? So I may have somebody that's working for an agency, the agency downsizes. I've got 2 counselors that are looking for work. How do we verify that they actually passed the exam?
What they can do is they should maintain their email that says they passed the certification exam. And we also maintain that data as long as it's been transmitted to HUD. So basically, all they have to do is go back into FHA Connection and ask to be certified. And at that time, we'll be able to confirm, yes, they passed the exam.
Okay.
Now, is your question, are you a member of the public looking, or are you an intermediary?
No, I'm an intermediary, or I'm one of the other agencies that wants to hire a counselor that was laid off from another agency.
As an intermediary, you could go into the FHAC system
Okay.
and check to see if that
So they
person.
stay in there when they're no longer associated with an agency?
Yes, they'll stay in the
That's-
system.
okay,
They
that's what I
won't be
need to
made
know.
public, but they'll stay in the system.
Perfect, thank you.
Great, thank you very much for sharing. We'll take one more best practice.
Hi. So our national training academy at NCRC, they have this fantastic course that a number of counselors have taken, and so some of the recommendations that we've made is, once you take these courses and the different training materials, not to sit on the information too long.
Yes.
So one thing
Yes.
that we notice is that, I guess maybe to no shock to anyone in the room, the counselors are very nervous about the exam because some of the modules are not their primary method of counseling or coaching. And so folks that have not had success with it, they've sat for a very long time on the information and materials and they're not as comfortable. And so some of the things that we've implemented is some working groups and folks that are
Great.
training on the exam, getting in group settings and going through practice exams together, working with peers that have more experience in some of the other modules as in comparison to themselves.
Okay, great, thank you. I do have a question for you since you're talking about practice exams. What would you like to see in a second practice exam?
That's a really good question. There is a lot of frustration amongst counselors, again, on something that you mentioned earlier in terms of where they're missing content or information. It needs more work, additional, work and service on that part. So I think counselors are specifically looking for, where do I need more work? Why? How bad did I do exactly? I think they were thinking that they would see more of quantitative
Okay.
numbers in terms of the practice exams. And so just seeing those paragraph descriptions of saying, hey, you need work in this area, a lot of them are not finding it very useful.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, appreciate that. Okay, definitely open to any questions you have about certification.
You know what percentage pass the first time and what percentage don't pass after 3 times?
We don't have those statistics. That's a good question, but we don't have those, so I couldn't tell you.
Hi, Heather Bowman with Idaho Housing. My main question was surrounding the FHA connection and the coordinators for larger networks or offices that have branch offices, which all have independent HCS numbers. There's great resources on how to apply for application coordinator as an individual for an individual agency, but there's not, I haven't found any resources that tell you how to handle it if your network is going to be going in and approving or deactivating everybody within their network. Is there information out there which talks about whether we go in and register for every single one of our agencies as an application coordinator, or how that works?
Per HCS, any of your agencies that are affiliated with you, they're automatically, that information's transferred from HCS into FHA Connection. So once you go into FHA Connection, those agencies will be partnered with you.
Okay, all right,
You do not have to do anything in regards to that.
perfect.
And
Thank
if
you.
it's incorrect, we do need to know,
Okay.
so.
Thank you for that, by the way, because otherwise it's challenging.
With regards to the individuals that are passing the exams and have not got connected to an agency, there's no expiration on that passing of the exam, correct?
That is correct. They only have to pass it one time.
Only because they're not connected. I mean, that exam is
Right.
pretty much lifelong.
That's right. So let's say you've got somebody that is thinking in the future of becoming a housing counselor, and they pass the test in 2018, but they don't actually decide to go to work for an agency until 2025. That exam data is still good.
And you can have more than one coordinator in the intermediary or in an agency.
You can
Correct.
have a minimum of 1 up to 4.
Up to 4. Okay, thank you.
Can I say? always have
Okay.
more than one?
We can probably take 1 or 2 more questions now. We've got 5 minutes left.
And I'm sorry, Linda Davis,
No, I would say always have more than one FHA coordinator. People go on vacation, maternity leave, they leave. I mean, always have more than one.
And your FHA application coordinator doesn't necessarily have to be a housing counselor or otherwise involved in the housing counseling program, as long as they understand their duties and they don't have overlap with other systems like Robin talked about, which would make them, okay, sorry.
Thank you. Patricia, I'm wondering what pool of money did you use for the reimbursements?
We use 2 different pools of money. For the cost of the exam itself, we are using our HUD funds. For the cost of the reimbursement for the exam, we're using our private funds from our general funds.
Okay, we have time for, I think, okay, go ahead.
I was wondering if anybody has any resources, not so much related to content, because I think the training and the modules are being well received by our staff and those preparing for the test, but some of our staff haven't taken any form of a test in 20 years, and just I've heard some feedback that the difference between the language and the structure of the training materials is very different from the structure and the language used in the final exam. And I understand you wouldn't want to present the exam questions ahead of time, but are there resources to help folks get familiar with the kinds of phrasing and questions on the final exam outside of just content-related training materials?
I think that is probably part of our training grantees exam preparation.
Okay.
I don't know, Karen, it looks like you're about to ask a question. Maybe you can answer that, at least for NeighborWorks perspective, what you do to help in the exam preparation.
But Lorraine, if I may, I mean, I think you
Yeah.
can also feel free to reach out to Patricia or I as well, and we'll be happy to connect with you.
Sounds good.
Sorry, I just
Well, obviously, I'm not part of the training division at
Okay.
NeighborWorks, but certainly we have training resources available, and I'd be glad to put anyone in contact with those resources if they need them. My question is circling back to FHA Connection. It's fantastic that intermediaries can now use that as a tool to monitor and track their sub-agencies. My question is that if you have intermediary access, can you verify in the aggregate, or do you have to verify agency by agency? Is there reporting connected with it? Does that make sense?
let's see, I'm trying to think. You would, not quite sure, and I might ask you to help me out here on pulling a report for your agency, how that will look in the FHA connection. Hugh, can you come to the mic? I'm sorry.
Just make an announcement. We're starting at 3, and those are the 2 options.
If you want to see what counselors work for what agencies, you have to enter each agency ID individually. You can't say, show me, list out all of my agencies, all my child agencies and what counselors work for them. At least that's the way it works today. That obviously could be changed.
Okay, great. All right, well, this concludes our certification presentation. And again, thank you very much to our guest speakers, Patricia and Linda.